Good morning, everyone. I see that people are starting to populate and join the webinar, so we will sit quietly for a little bit while we're waiting for folks to get on. Looking forward to a good webinar and good session, and looking forward to if there the questions that I'm sure will come as we as we travel through this and discuss some things, and I'll be happy to answer all your questions at the end of the webinar. Well, it is 10 a.m., and so I would like to start timely. Good morning. My name is Syeetah Hampton-El. I am the Family Advocacy Attorney here at Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. It is my pleasure to have an opportunity to share this information with you. And we are today going to discuss the Maryland Reduction of Lead in Housing Law, rights, responsibilities, and remedies. And what we'll do is, if you have questions, I will happily take the questions, but at the end of the broadcast. So if you would just type your questions in the box, and I will go over them at the end, and we'll do a thorough question and answer session at the end. So today, like I said, we're focusing on the Maryland Reduction of Lead Risk in Housing Law. That law can be found in the Maryland Environment Article, Section 6-801 through 6852. Now, you're probably thinking this lawyer is about to give us all this legal jargon or what have you. I promise you I am not. But it is important that you understand where the information is coming from, where the basis and where the background comes from, and this is in fact where it comes from. It's actually in the law and very well documented and detailed and explained. So let's start first. What properties are covered? This is in the definition section of the Environment Article. We're looking at what's defined as an affected property. An affected property is property that's built pre-1978, and it's a residential rental. That includes also multifamily dwelling units. Now you'll see on the slide that at one point the law was pre-1950 homes, and that was the law, and everyone's probably very familiar with that part of the law. But the law was changed about a year ago, and now we're including those 50 to 78 residential rentals. And so just be sure that, think about how old is my property? Is it a residential rental? Am I renting the property out? And therefore it is an affected property, and what my obligations are. The law changed, as I said, about a year ago in January of 2015 to include all residential rental properties that were built before 1978. Now, as before, the 50 to 78 properties, if you're any of those property owners are on the webinar, you remember if you were 50 to 78 before the law changed, you could opt in, or you didn't have to, wasn't required. Well, now it's required. In addition, you had to start registering your property in December of 2014. Now you're probably thinking, well, when would we have to get a lead certificate? Well, the law says, lead certificates will be required only after triggering events. And those triggering events include, 1, was there a change in occupancy in the affected rental property? So, for example, the law changed in January 1 of 2015. We have a property that was built in 1951. If I am renting from that landlord, does the landlord need to have a lead certificate? Nope, no change in occupancy, I haven't moved. But let's say in February of 2015 I move. That landlord now has to obtain a lead certificate because that was a triggering event. There was a change in occupancy. The other triggering events include if the landlord receives a notice of defect. So let's say, again, I'm renting from that same landlord. The property is built in 1951. January, everything's fine. I don't send anything. But in March, I send the landlord a notice of defect. And I indicate in that notice of defect that there's chipping, peeling, flaking paint, and some other structural defects. Now the landlord is on notice. Now the landlord must obtain a lead certificate. The third triggering event is if there's a notice of an elevated blood lead level. Same property, 1950, built in 1951, January 1, 2015, things are great. Let's say again in now March or April, the landlord receives a notice of an elevated blood lead level. I have a child at the property. The notice comes from the health department. Now the landlord, again, on notice, must obtain a lead certificate and have the property inspected by a certified lead inspector. Now the notice of defect that I'm talking about is included in the 3 attachments that were a part of this webinar. One is the state notice of tenant's rights, and it also includes the notice of defect. Another is to protect your family from leading your home. And the other pamphlet that was included is the EPA's Renovate Right pamphlet. And we'll discuss those things as we go through. But I noticed that I had said notice of defect and hadn't really discussed it with you. Now, what properties are not covered? First of all, anything that's built after 78, that goes without saying. Any properties that have been certified lead-free. Any properties that are not offered for rent. So I own my home is owner-occupied, it is not offered for rent, it's not included. Or any short-term seasonal rentals. How can you be compliant? The way that as a property owner you can be compliant, first, you have to register the property with Maryland Department of the Environment and pay a $30 annual fee. And that's per unit. So if I decide to rent my house, and it's built before 1988, actually built in the 50s, I think, I have to register with Maryland Department of the Environment, and I pay $30. Let's say I decide to cut my house up into these very small, tiny apartments. Well, then I'm paying $30 per unit. Also, I must obtain a risk reduction inspection certificate prior to the occupancy or in response to the notice of defect or notice of an elevated blood lead level. So it is not okay for you have a tenant in the property and then decide, well, I'm going to get the lead certificate now that they're here, Nope, you have to do it before they move in. And when you're renting properties, you also must include a copy, provide tenants a copy of the lead certificate. You also have to provide them the copy of the Notice of Tenants' Rights, which is the PDF that's included with this webinar, as well as Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. Both of these documents we've provided, included with this webinar as a PDF, but you can also print them from the Maryland Department of the Environment's website, as well as the EPA's website, and they're both easily accessible to you. What is a lead certification? So there, in Maryland, there are 5. You have lead-free, limited lead-free, full risk reduction, modified risk reduction, and lead-safe. Primarily, what we're talking about in these slides, and as far as the risk reduction standards, if you will, we're really dealing with full risk reduction and modified risk reduction. Now, all of these things, again, are defined in the environment article. When we're talking about limited lead-free, best way I can explain that to you would be no lead on the inside, lead on the outside. Property's been completely rehabbed, gutted out, renovated on the inside, and there's still on the outside some semblance of some chipping, peeling paint, or some other issues on the outside of the property. Those properties, they are to be inspected every 2 years. Lead-free, if you obtain a lead-free certificate, that is good forever. Full risk reduction or modified risk reduction are the two that we're pretty much talking about at this point, as far as when you have to get them at tenant turnover, and the work that's required based on the after the inspector comes in to conduct a visual and dust inspection, and will determine the what classification or certification you obtain based on the work that's required. The lead inspection clearance. Here in the state, there are clearance levels that are set by the state, by Maryland Department of the Environment. Those are on the PowerPoint slide, and you can see them. If you are familiar with having lead inspection, or you had a lead inspection, your certified lead inspector may also go over this information with you. That inspector has to be accredited or certified by the state of Maryland. Maryland Department of the Environment's website has a very, very good listing, very detailed listing of both contractors that are accredited and or certified, as well as inspectors that are accredited and or certified. Those individuals, not only do you get their information, but it's broken out by location in the state. So if you're looking for someone here in Baltimore City, you can find them. You're looking for someone on the Eastern Shore, you can find them. You don't have to go through the entire list. The inspector, when they come into the property, they will conduct a visual inspection to verify that there's no chipping, peeling, or flaking paint. They will walk around. They're looking at baseboards, windowsills, door jambs, all these walls, of course. Then, if they don't see any chipping or peeling paint, then they will conduct using dust wipes. So they're going to take dust wipes of your windowsills. They're going to take dust wipes of your floors. They'll take dust wipes of door jamb areas. All of these things to determine whether or not they'll send the samples off to be analyzed and make a determination based on those samples whether or not those samples fit within either at or below the clearance level that's been set by the state, and whether or not the property will obtain a passing lead certificate. Now, legal rights and remedies. This is the part that I'm actually very familiar with because I'm an attorney. What if there are defects in the home after the tenant moves in? Well, that's that notice of defects that's at the last page of the Notice of Tenants' Rights. If you're looking at it, you can see it's pretty detailed as far as locations, if there's chipping and peeling paint, or locations if there are structural defects. The Notice of Defect also provides you some additional information that will be coming from the tenant, because remember, they're filling this out. So they're going to send this to you. And this is a way for the tenant to put you, landlord, on notice of conditions at the property. Remember, most landlords and property owners don't live in the property in which they're renting. So this is a way for the tenant to keep you informed of the conditions and problems at the property. If there's chipping and peeling paint at the property and you must remediate that or abate that, one, make sure that you're using certified workers and contractors. Again, go to MDE's website. It is a great website, very user-friendly, providing detailed information of what you should be getting from your inspector, what you should be getting from your contractor. That the tenant also can ask to see verification, so this helps with that. One of the things that I do is if I'm representing a tenant and there's work to be done, I will communicate with the property owner for the name or the company name that's coming out to perform the work so that I can share that information with my client. It helps to alleviate any type of confrontation or problems because now they can see they're certified. It comes off the state's website. It cuts out a lot of additional any issues or problems. Remember that children and pregnant women must be out of the home, and adults have to be out of the work area. The workers must use lead-safe work practices and proper containment. So if you have and you're using a certified worker and contractor, these are things that they know because they've been accredited and they're certified. They know, no dry scraping. So I get it, you're a property owner and you just want to come in and take care of it yourself. Please don't do that. There's a problem. There could be a problem if you do that in essence because one, it's not following proper lead-safe work practices, which indicate you should work wet, not dry. Secondly, because you may not be a certified lead contractor, and therefore you're doing work and not following the proper work practices in order to protect yourself, your own safety, as well as the health and safety of your tenants. When the job is done, then you have a certified lead contractor, inspector come in. They'll do a visual inspection, they'll do a dust test, and you'll get your lead certificate assuming you pass. If the work will take longer than 1 day, then you, the property owner, are responsible for providing reasonable temporary relocation for the tenant. I always tell, if I'm dealing with representing tenants and speaking with property owners, I always tell the property owner, I'm telling you this, but if you don't believe me, call MDE, check the law, because I want to make sure that we're all getting the same information, but that we're all on the same page about how we can make sure the property is safe and make sure the occupants are safe. Remember, all persons at risk must be completely out of the home during all the work. So regardless of the amount of time that it takes, people can't come in and out of the home. And this is something that I tell my clients when work is being done in the home. Take enough stuff, enough clothing and items with you to be out of the home for 3 or 4 days, or take double that amount, because what you don't want to have happen is unfortunately, sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes things happen, and so you want the tenant, I want to make sure that my clients are prepared for those things, and that also comes from just good communication with the property owner. Once the work has begun again, the tenant cannot return to the property until a valid lead certificate has been obtained. Basically, that means once the work is started, they can't come back. So just make sure that your tenants understand that, and that you're a certified lead contractor. Of course, they understand it. Now, what if you're the property owner and you decide not to respond to the notice of defect or the NOD within 30 days? Well, one, the tenant's going to file a complaint for rent escrow in the local district court. So they will file this complaint, and the tenant, rent escrow is the way for the tenant to let the court know that there are conditions and problems at the property that rise to the level of a threat to life, health, and safety, including chipping, peeling, and flaking paint. And that basically the tenant now wants the court to get involved to make the property owner do what they're supposed to do and make the necessary repairs. In addition, the property owner could face fines and penalties from Maryland Department of the Environment for not being registered, for not having a lead certificate, and also any liability risk that may follow beyond those things. As I said, what rent escrow is, but it's also used as a way for the tenant not only to put the court on notice, but also the tenant would now can be required to pay into the escrow account to pay the rent. So property owner, instead of you getting your rent, the court gets your rent and holds it until the necessary repairs are made. not really what you want for your business. I completely understand. And oftentimes, this is when I normally meet several property owners, is in this process because I'm representing tenants. And at the end of the day, if the property owner is responsive or is beginning to make progress dealing with the work, then that helps, that can alleviate or prevent the rent escrow process. In essence, you may not even get there. Or during the rent escrow process, sometimes it is it's an access issue. The tenant isn't providing access, or there's a communication issue between the tenant and the landlord. Whatever the issue may be, the rent escrow process is a way to resolve many of those issues, not only the conditions of the property, but to address maybe some other outlying issues that may arise as a result. The court in the rent escrow process can either approve the escrow, finding that there are threats to life, health, and safety at the property, order that the tenant pays into the court escrow account. The court can decide to decrease the amount of rent that's owed. So depending on the severity of the conditions of the property, if, let's say, rent's $1,000, the court could reduce the rent to $500. So you're already losing some of your money just because for a failure to respond or be responsive to the tenant. The court can also order that the landlord perform risk reduction using certified workers and have the property inspected. So all the things we talked about previously. The court can also order that the landlord pay for the reasonable relocation expenses while those treatments are being performed. We discussed that as well. And the court can also terminate the lease and allow the tenant to use the rent for moving costs. Again, all of these things could be avoided if, one, there's good communication, two, where the property owner is being responsive to the tenant and to the notice of defects that are being sent. Now, failure to pay rent or summary ejectment, some may be familiar with that term as well. When a property owner, this is when a property owner files a complaint because the tenant has failed to pay rent, and the property owner is now seeking help from the court to gain possession of the property for the tenant's failure to pay rent. In 2005, the law changed so that there's a line now on the failure to pay rent complaint, I believe it's line 3, in which not only does the property owner have to indicate whether or not it's an affected property, but also the property owner must fill in their lead certificate or risk reduction certificate number, as well as any registration information. Depending on the jurisdiction, you may or may not have to register as a rental. So make sure that when you are filling out a failure to pay rent complaint, that, remember, this is information that you would have. So complete it in its entirety, the entire form in its entirety, because there are times that while I'm in court, if I'm representing a tenant in a failure to pay rent hearing, I may ask for the rent case to be dismissed because the property lacks the lead certificate, there's no number, and depending on the judge, it could be granted. So again, you don't want to lose out on your ability to collect rent or to obtain a judgment because you just did not fill out the complaint completely, or you were lacking or missing the risk reduction certificate information. Now, what the rental property owner can and cannot do: one, you cannot discriminate against families with lead-poisoned children. You cannot ask for a child's lead level or ask if the child is tested for lead before accepting a rental application. I would tell you that if you do those things, they are in violation of the Fair Housing Act, and so you cannot do them. You can't and cannot evict a family for sending a notice of defect. Remember, this document is a way for the tenant to let you, property owner or landlord, know what's happening at the property. I've dealt with several property owners here in Baltimore, or properties here in Baltimore City, but they live in Washington, D.C. or Montgomery County. So they're not local, which means if the tenant doesn't send the information, then how would you know the conditions of the property? So think about it that way. It's a way to remain informed as to what's happening at the property and the condition or any issues or problems. But the landlord can evict a family for failing to pay rent. So remember that if you have tenants that are failing to pay that are not paying their rent, not holding up their end of the bargain as far as their responsibilities, that you can evict them for failing to pay rent. Now, before here in the state, there used to be something called the qualified offer. Many of you on the webinar may have been familiar with that. However, that's no longer available since 2011. Excuse me. There's some standard property coverage availability for lead liability. You should talk to your insurance company about that, as well as any surplus lines. Again, speak with your insurance company about that information. But I just wanted to make sure that, since I mentioned liability risk earlier, it's something that you could face by not complying with or not following up to the notice of defect, we did provide you some information about that. Now, I'm sure that many of you on the webinar are thinking, hey, this work sounds really expensive. I own 1 or 2 properties. How am I going to be able to afford it? Well, the state, Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, has several grants, if you will, grant or loan programs to address lead hazard reduction. One, you have to, of course, be a Maryland resident. You can own or occupy the dwelling to be repaired as your principal residence, or it's a residential rental property. There are no income limits, and financial assistance is based on your ability to repay. So if you have a big job and it's going to be $10,000 to $15,000 and you're thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, excuse me, complete the application, and you can get that online, and there are some monies that are available that can be of assistance. These are the type of properties that are eligible. So, of course, a property that's built before 1978, I think that goes without saying, that the property must be in need of lead hazard reduction activity. So this is not the time when you're going to, I'm going to get a new garage or an add-on to the home in addition to the house. Not the time for that. Not the type of monies that are available for that. Also, the property has to be structurally sound. So it could need lead hazard reduction work and stripping, peeling paint throughout, but the roof is caved in, the walls have fallen down on one side, and the floor is sunken in. Not the type of program, not the type of house that would be eligible for the work here. The unit, of course, has to be registered with MDE as a rental, and licensed child care facilities also may be eligible. Improvements that are permitted, we've discussed those, addressing all lead hazards. The example that I like to give is you have a 3-story house and you decide, I'm only going to address the 1st and 2nd floors, not the top floor. Nope, got to do them all. It covers any lead-related costs required to meet the lead dust clearance standards. So that's abatement, that's remediation, discuss those things with your contractor. And any activity that meets the risk reduction standards. So remember, use this as a tool, an additional tool in your toolbox to update your property to ensure that the property is in compliance with MDE's laws, and as well as to get the lead hazard reduction activities complete. Improvements that are not covered, like I said, those general property improvements or rehab, that new addition, that garage, not this loan. Repair of minor structural deficiencies, you have a minor porch issue or something, nope, not included. But all work must be completed by a state-certified lead contractor. Again, MDE's website, very detailed list. I would advise you to check that list as you're looking to complete this work and to get this work complete in a timely way, but also in a safe way. If you are looking for additional information, Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development's website, very good website, has good information to be able to address any issues that you have. Also, while I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the pamphlet. In the pamphlet, there's each jurisdiction, city, town, and/or county has a local administering office or agency. So if you have questions as you're filling out the application, definitely contact these agencies, and you can find this information on Department of Housing and Community Development's website. MDE, EPA, here are their phone numbers as well as their websites. Remember, the documents we provided, they're not our documents, they're state documents or federal documents, and they all can be printed online. Both the state and the EPA, they want this information to get out. They want you to have all the documents that you need to ensure that you're in compliance when you're renting a new property or at tenant turnover, to make sure that you're giving out the notice of tenant's rights and to protect your family from lead. If you're doing renovation on your own, you own your home, Renovate Right is definitely the brochure for you. If you have additional questions, here's our website and our phone number. You can reach me. I'm always here. So now we're going to see what questions we have. Okay, so the first question, what's considered a short-term rental? Ryan, that's a good question. A short-term rental, typically how it's been explained to me and how I'll explain it to you is normally something like a kind of going out to the ocean, you're renting something for maybe like a week or two for a beach visit or what have you. That's pretty much a short-term rental. So think about it in that way. Denise, your question, clarification, affected property. Rental built prior to 78 and not necessarily one that has had lead found. That is correct. An affected property is a very general definition, which is it is residential rental property built before 1978. That's it. Gregory, is there any lead immunity for compliance with all, landlord immunity for compliance with all requirements? I cannot answer that question, but what I would say to you is you are in a better situation if, let's say, down the road maybe you are sued or there's some issue or concern about the manner in which you keep your property. If you show that you have always registered your property has lead certificates, it's been deemed as lead-free or limited lead-free, or you have notice of defects and you show when you've responded to them, I would just say make sure your records are intact. That's the best advice I could give you without giving any, per se, additional legal advice. And do landlords, this is a lengthy one, but I'm going to try to see what I can get. Do landlords have any rights in this? This whole presentation seems focused on tenants' rights. Everything you're describing seems to involve a financial or practical burden on the landlord. Using certified lead contractors, doing lead inspections, repainting continuously, relocating tenants during work, all cost the landlords money and makes renting property less attractive, and in the end will lead to a reduction in low-income housing. And I agree with you, and I'm sure you're surprised to hear that, although I represent tenants. The way that I explain it to tenants and the way that I explain it to landlords is this way. Everyone has a responsibility. So if this is your business, in order for you to maintain your business, there are certain things you have to do, certain rules you have to follow, certain laws you have to follow. One is making sure that you're investing in your property to ensure that you're providing quality housing. The tenant has an obligation to notify you if there are any issues or problems at the property and ensure that they're paying their rent. And so if everyone's coming to the table with understanding their rights and responsibilities, then the presentation isn't so much focused on tenants' rights as it is on everyone's rights and responsibilities and just a general understanding of what the law is. Now, as for landlords, are there rights that you have? Of course. If the tenant isn't providing you access, how are you going to be able to get the work done? How can you address their issues or concerns if they're not telling you? But in the same vein, what if you are not even coming to the property, not being responsive? Then there has to be a consequence on both sides. I hope that answered your question. It does seem like it costs a lot, but I will tell you that even before I bought my house, I rented for many years here in Baltimore City, and I never had any issue. I lived in older homes, I lived in older row homes, and they were well-kept and well-maintained properties. And when I moved in, I got the information I was supposed to get. My notice of tenants' rights, to protect your family from lead, although I don't think mine was as pretty blue. And I also did receive a copy of the lead certificate. And if I had issues, I notified my landlord of those issues and vice versa. I think at the end of the day, it's really a relationship. And if everyone is dealing with that, looking at it in that regard, in that vein, I think that some of the additional costs as far as lead hazard abatement or reduction, lead hazard reduction work or abatement may not be an issue for you depending on the manner in which the property is maintained. So just think about it in those ways. Estimated, I hope that answered your question, Ann. Robin, estimated cost of full lead-free certification. I will tell you, I do not know an estimated cost. I don't want to give you a number. However, a couple of companies I think that we've dealt with here, we've dealt with ARC. You can give them a call, ARC Environmental. They should be able to give you some information as to cost. Lead Tech, I think, is another company. They might be able to give you some information as to a cost. I'm not referring these companies to anyone, but these are the two that I could think of off the top of my head. Denise, you're very welcome. Glad to do it. Claudia, what if you rent a bedroom in the home you live, which is also another question from Paul. If you rent homes by the week, would that be considered a short-term rental? It's possible. Claudia, if you rent a room in your bedroom, you rent a bedroom in your home that you live in, I do not believe that you also have to obtain a lead certificate, because that's almost the equivalent of like a rooming house. But I would suggest, just to be on the safe side, call MDE, and they can address that issue for you or address that concern for you. Most oftentimes it is considered to be a rooming house. However, again, just to be on the safe side. Paul, if you rent rooms by the week, would that be considered a short-term rental? It is possible. And I know I'm giving a lot of possibilities. It's the lawyer in me. I can't help it. It's the gray area of everything. It is possible. I think there's an argument for it on both sides. Again, be sure that you, I would just check with MDE just to be on the safe side. And also, if you're just renting a room, is it a room that also has a kitchenette or a kitchen area, own bathroom? Then you might be considered not to be just a room, and it may be considered to be an apartment. And this legislation has forced me to spend thousands of dollars and to do things for tenants that I have not done for my own family. And I do apologize that the legislation and the laws have been costing you to spend additional monies. I do apologize that that's posing an issue for you. Robin, is there language that should be included in the lease agreement stating that the property has been certified lead-free? I don't have exact language, but I did a training last night, and what I advised and what I said to a landlord who had a similar question was, although because your property is lead-free, you are exempt from several of the risk reduction information or requirements, provide a copy of the lead-free cert, or show the tenant the lead-free cert if you're not comfortable providing a copy of it. That way, it will help alleviate some of the issues and problems or some of the concern maybe that the tenant may have down the road. Brenda, if a property is owned by an entity, LLC, but not a rental property, is it required to be registered with MDE? If it is not a residential rental property, then my understanding would be no. However, even if it's owned by an entity, but let's say you decide to make it a rental property, then my answer would be yes. Do you still have brochures and do you still give brochures and pamphlets even if the property has been certified lead-free? This is Robin. Actually, you're right. Nope, you don't, because you're exempt from all this. So if you have and Gregory, that's your same question, do we still have to provide the pamphlets every 2 years? While the law does exempt you out from the risk reduction, passing out of pamphlets and providing of a lead certificate, here's what I would say do. Because, especially now with lead being back in the news so much, CYA, be as careful as you can to make sure that you're providing all the information that you can to your tenant. So again, you can print them off, copy them as many times as you want, but I would say still give them, although the law says you don't have to, I understand that, but if you still would like to, you can. Thank you for doing the presentation, and you're more than welcome. I'm glad that I'm able to do it. I hope that this has answered some of your questions, and if you still have some, feel free and call me or email me. Is there a grace period for landlords to have lead testing performed? Some may not have known it was required prior to occupancy. No, Michael, unfortunately, there's no grace period. Get it done as soon as possible. Brenda, if a rental property has had no triggers, does it still have to be inspected every 2 years? Brenda, I would ask, what type of property are we talking about? Are we talking about a property that's been certified as limited lead-free? If so, it's still, from my understanding, reading the law, it's still every 2 years. If your own house is painted and nothing is chipping, can it be considered safe? Your own house, Claudia, I see your question, as in house that you own, owner-occupied. I can't say if it can be considered safe. What I can say is if there's no chipping and peeling paint, look at the age of the home. If there are any other conditions and problems. If you want to be on a safe side, because you own your house, if you want to get an inspection, you can. But I think that's the only best way I can answer that question. Robin, if you give tenant notice that you would like to have a lead inspection performed, and you give tenant notice a date and time, can you enter property to have it performed? Just for the inspection, I would refer to the terms of your lease. So if your lease says that you can enter, in most leases anyway, a kind of emergency condition that you can enter, or speak with the tenant as to whether or not you can enter in the property when they're not home if it's a non-emergency. So I would just be cautious and careful about that. I do not see any other questions. I think I've lost the questions part. If there are any other questions, my information, oh, there's another question. Is there standard charges for inspection services such as there are for car inspections? It varies from company to company, I'll be very honest. But like I said, give a few a call. They can give you some further information about that. If you have any questions, I'm going to type in my email address, or I think I'm going to type in my email address. Okay, so I'm going to type in my email address for everyone. There's more questions. Okay, I'm not going anywhere. What do I need to do every 2 years when I have a long-term tenant? Marianne, if you would tell me, do you have a limited lead-free certificate, or what type of lead certificate do you have? And I could better answer your question. Brenda, what is the accreditation date on the lead certificate? Well, the accreditation information is typically for the certified lead inspector and for the contractor. It is typically not for the certificate, if I understand your question or what you're asking me. Okay, I'm including my email address, so you'll have that. Now, tenant has been in house. Okay, Marianne, I see your follow-up. Tenant has been in house for 5 years, and I have no certificates. Okay, so Marianne, couple of additional questions. What is the age of your property? Was it built before 1978? If so, then make sure that and I don't want you to, if you don't want to answer, I understand through the whole chain of responses, but make sure that you have registered your property with Maryland Department of the Environment. That's first. Secondly, make sure if there have been no inspections at all, but the property is built before 1978, have a certified lead inspector come out to the property as soon as possible to have them do a visual inspection as well as a certified inspection. It's between 50 and 78. Okay, so make sure, Mary, make sure I have this right. You have a residential rental property. The tenant has been in the house for 5 years. It's built between 50 and 78, but they're all registered. Okay, so Marianne, you fall into the triggering event. let's say your tenant that's been there for 5 years decides to move out, then that would be considered a change in occupancy, so then you would have to get a lead certificate. The other two other triggering events are, let's say the tenant sends you the notice of defect and says, hey, there's chipping, peeling paint in the baseboard of the living room or what have you. Then you would have to get a lead inspection certificate. The other is if the tenant, your tenant, that's great that you had them for 5 years, if they send you notice of, or you get notice from the health department of the elevated blood lead level, then that's your triggering event, okay? I hope that answers your question. H. Ivory, what about, yes, Marianne, basically you don't need to do anything until turnover unless you get one of the other two, the notice of defects or the notice of the elevated blood lead level. H. Ivory, what about inspectors who have given fraudulent reports to some and all the properties they inspected are now under investigation by MDE? Ouch, that's a serious one. I would suggest that you call MDE ASAP. I'm well aware of that issue. It made the paper. I would advise you to call them ASAP because they're working with property owners to have properties re-inspected. So you definitely want to get that done. Marianne, you are very welcome. I hope that that answered your question. We have about 15 more minutes, so if there are more questions, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. If you don't have any more questions, that's okay too. I included my email address, so shoot me an email with any questions that you have. I'll be happy to respond back. And be sure to look out for the email that will come hopefully by the end of the week with the recorded version of this webinar. So that way you'll have the webinar you can share with other property owners. You address to make sure that you're still up to date on what the law has. Okay, Marianne, just confirm, nothing until turnover or other triggering event. That is correct. That is it. Yes, that is correct. Okay, H. Ivory, does the inspector have liability to the property owner in the case above? I can't give you legal advice. I would advise you to speak with an attorney about that specific question, and also speak with MDE regarding that. Is there a Robin, is there a website that gives a free current Maryland residential lease agreement that has lead language in it? Robin, I'm thinking not that I know of. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, it just means that I don't know. But I would say check with Google is the best thing that I can think of. L. Wingate, I can't see your email address. Please also repeat your name for the record. Oh, my first name is Syeetah. My last name is Hampton-El. And, okay, I'm going to type my email address again. And send to all. Okay, so it should come to everyone again. Again, shoot me any questions you have. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Just say that the advice or information I'm giving is not legal advice, just general information, trying to provide a service and be of assistance. Are there any additional questions that anyone has? We still have about 15 minutes. Okay. I'm a property manager. An owner decided to do an inspection, though not necessary at this time. Tenant was in for a while and not moving soon, not pregnant, no children. So when the results came in, if lead is present, would the owner be obligated to do the work right away or a next turnover? Susan, I see your question. I commend the owner for being proactive. What I would suggest, although there are no children and no pregnant women in the property, when the results come, will the owner be obligated to do the work right away? It will be up to the property owner at that point, only because you're saying that they did not have to do one at that time. But if there's possibly chipping or peeling paint at the property, they definitely want to go ahead and get that addressed and be prepared that the next turnover they will be required to conduct a new inspection. So I hope that answers your question. For those who were still looking for my email address, it's as in Sam, H as in Henry, A, M, P as in Paul, T as in Tom, O, N, E as in Edward, L as in Larry, at GHHI.org. Any additional questions before we sign off? Because I don't want to cheat anyone out of the hour that we promised. Robin, your email is on the sidebar at the bottom of a couple of the questions people asked. Yes, yes it is. Yes it is. I know a few had said they couldn't see it, so I just want to make sure that I had put it back, put it in again so that those who had not could see it. That's great. We've had about a little over 50 individuals who have joined us, property owners that have joined us for this webinar. I really appreciate you all taking the time. You've asked some really, really good questions. Alan, I have a property registered on MDE's website. Does that mean my property has been inspected and safe to rent? No. MDE's website provides the property, if you register the property, that information is there. But remember, if you're an affected property pre-1978, you must have the property inspected. So make sure that you do that. Mary Ann, are the lead brochures to be given every 2 years for long-term tenants? Mary Ann, no. You give them at the beginning of the tenancy. Brenda, if the property is full risk reduction, does it have to be inspected every 2 years if there has not been a change of tenant? No. For full risk reduction, it's at the change of tenant turning over, at change of tenant turnover. So remember that. So you've had a tenant for 2 years, which is great, but if they vacate the property tomorrow, you will have to have a new lead inspection conducted because it's a change of tenant turnover for full risk reduction. Kenneth, is there a way to get a lead-free inspection good for the life of the property? Yes, that would be lead-free. And you can contact any lead inspector, certified lead inspector, and they will discuss not only price and things with you, but address those issues as well. Linda, you are very welcome. Glad to do it. Susan, I still don't understand when to choose which type of lead test. You can talk with a certified lead inspector, and they will discuss those options with you. Laura, so if I have a long-term tenant, pre the new law in 2015, I have a registered property. What else, if anything, do I do? Tenant still on a property since 2010. At this point, nothing. If your property, as long as you registered it, which you say you have, Laura, the property is that it includes, it was built between the 50 and 78. You're basically waiting for a triggering event. So tenant change in occupancy or tenant turnover, notice of defects, and notice of an elevated blood lead level. Sounds like you're in a good place, Laura, from the information you've provided. Any additional questions? And Susan, if you have additional questions, once we get off the webinar, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to direct you to different areas on MDE's website or send you a couple of links from their website to address, to be of some assistance. Lead inspection, Alan, lead inspection lasts for 2 years. No. So, okay, you're welcome, Susan. Okay, so there are several types of lead classifications that you can obtain based on the condition of the property. And so you want to make sure that you're talking with your certified lead inspector as to what you want. Do you want the inspector to come in to do the visual and dust test, or do you want the inspector to come in with the XRF gun and they're getting all the way down to the studs to determine if there's lead paint anywhere beyond that first level of paint on the wall? So Alan, I would advise you to speak with a certified lead inspector. No, the lead inspection doesn't last for 2 years. The 2 years is looking at a limited lead-free property, not the full risk reduction, modified risk reduction, or lead-free. Susan, you are welcome. Glad to be here. Kenneth, rental is now advertised. How soon should I get an inspection? Kenneth, if the property is advertised now, you need to get an inspection ASAP. So contact a certified lead inspector. Whew, had a blank. Contact a certified lead inspector, and they will get them to come out as soon as possible to go ahead and get that property inspected. What is your phone number? My number is included on this last slide, 410-534-6447. Laura, do I need to register my property every year or just once? Well, it depends on the, I'm drawing a blank. It depends on the lead certificate that you have. The limited lead-free, I do not believe that you have to register every year, but everything else you pretty much have to register on a yearly basis. Again, contact MDE just to be certain on that, and especially depending on the lead certificate that you have. George, is there a standard cost for lead inspections? Do the lead inspectors allowed to charge any, are they allowed to charge any price they want? There's, I don't want to say a standard cost, not so much of a standard cost. However, it has to be a reasonable cost. So contact MDE. They have actually a spreadsheet that I'm actually looking at, which gives the information about the different types of lead certificates as well as possible pricing. So I'm looking at this. Some of the pricing could be $295 if you're trying to get a lead-free certificate, but I don't know how old this information is. Some of it could be less than that, depending if you're getting the visual and just the dust wipe. So it varies on what type of inspection you're getting. Laura, if tenant has not moved out since 2010 and I do not have a certificate, do I need to register my property? Yes, you still have to register your property. Kenneth, how long is a pre-rental inspection good for? There isn't really there's no specified time that it's good for, but remember, if you have put the property on the market, you want to make sure that it is truly ready for rental, and that you can get that inspection done as soon as possible. The cost is based on the number of rooms being inspected. They test the window and floor in each room, and it's correct. So make sure that you speak with a certified lead inspector to get that information. Some also charge additional mileage if you select someone out of your area. Now, Michael, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I'm going to make a note of that so I can share that in the next training. Thank you. Laura, do I need to register it every year? In your previous answer, you mentioned depends on the type of certificate. What if you do not have one? No. Okay. Laura, do me a favor. Give me a call once we get off the line. I want to get once we get off the webinar, I want to get some additional information because I think I'm getting lost in the number, the questions and the answers based on that I'm giving other individuals and in turn that I'm providing to you. So I want to make sure that I'm answering your question as clearly as possible. Shoot me an email or give me a call and we can discuss the particulars of your rental. Any other questions? Where can I find my lead cert? Alan, where can you find it? If you are the property owner, the lead inspector would give you a copy as well as send a copy to Maryland Department of the Environment. If you have misplaced your copy, you can contact the Department of the Environment and they should be able to provide that information to you. I am not sure if it's at a cost. I don't believe so. But definitely give them a call, and that's information they can help you with. You're welcome. Glad to help. We have about 5 minutes, so if anyone has any other questions, again, I don't want to feel like that I'm not giving you your hours worth. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you very much for the compliment. I'm glad to help. Again, this is important to us. Although, yes, I do represent tenants, but it is very important that we are sharing the information and making sure that everyone has a good knowledge and good information to assist them in their business. Please type your name. Thanks. Yep, give me 1 second. I can do that. Okay. Okay. Try. Okay.
While Syeetah is typing that out, My name is Alex, and I'm going to be the person who's sending out the recording of the webinar. And just so you all are aware, our goal is to have that recording out by Wednesday, so by tomorrow, close of business. So that will have the recording. It will also have the same handouts that you were provided on this webinar. They'll be provided in that email as well, just so that you have somewhere to reference this webinar if you ever need to do that in the future.
Next question, where can I find a list of certified contractors again? Maryland Department of the Environment on their website. It is a very, very good list. So definitely check that out. You can find contractors and inspectors on that website. You can also find information about the different types of lead inspections that are offered, different pieces of documentation that you may see or that your inspector may have, where one can get trained and accredited to become a certified lead inspector or contractor. When I tell you it is a great website, it is great, very useful information for tenants and for landlords and for just the general consumer. So I hope that you all take advantage of that free information and the quality information that's being put forth by Maryland Department of the Environment. All right, we have about 2 minutes left. I put my name, you have my email address, you have the phone number for the office here. Again, it has been my pleasure to answer your questions, provide this training. I'm glad that Alex is here. He's been great with setting this up and technical support and all those things. And I look forward to doing this again possibly, as well as answering any questions that you may have now via email or even via the phone. We're pretty much, I'll sit silent at this point unless someone has anything else. Denise, you're very welcome.